nice to see all of you. My grandpa is here. It is also Grandpa Day for me, so thank you for coming, Grandpa. Happened to be in town, and this is how good you will look in 20 years. So, like Mary said, I will talk a little bit today about my experience from Pleasant Ridge here. I'm going to focus a little more specifically on some aspects of things that we did here that I found very useful in my current work. I do computer programming and map design and kind of a lot of computer stuff. So I have thought about this a lot in the last, well, a lot in the last couple of days, but a lot in the last few years also in what were these skills from a long time ago that have helped me do what I'm doing right now. As Mary mentioned, I graduated here from high school, or from 8th grade in this gym in 2002, and started in kindergarten in 1993. So after I finished school here, I went next door to Youth Initiative High School, and from there I went on to Lawrence University, which is over in Appleton, Wisconsin. I was interested in archaeology, and from there got a degree in anthropology, which is kind of what you do as an undergrad if that's what you're interested in. But it was near the end of my college experience that I came across the work that I'm doing now, or what has led to the work that I'm doing now. And it really started with historic maps and comparing them to current maps and learning a lot about the software and the database structures and all of that that's used for everything mapping nowadays. It's a field called GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, and it's really the way you got here with your GPS in the car is a pretty good example of how all that works. So I found, actually, that there's a few things that were super useful to me that I trace all the way back to here, to Pleasant Ridge, and this may be kind of surprising to you. You've toured the school, and I bet you did not see any computers. Pretty sure you didn't see any TVs, and if you did, I'm sure they were covered in silks. This is what we do to disguise them around here. But generally, it's safe to say this is a very low-tech school. It was, when I was here, I remember that we were all startled a few times when the PA system was mistakenly turned on, because that was about as much technology as existed here. We had phones. So it might not make sense to say that there's a lot of these little pieces that have been really helpful to me. But I can really trace a lot of this back. So one thing I'll start with, the most obvious when it comes to maps that I've had to work on is there's a lot of artsy stuff that goes on here. Everybody paints, everybody draws, everybody wants their neighbor's colored pencils, and it's one thing that comes from that is just a lot of looking at colors and a lot of internalizing color shades, and just kind of having that around a lot is kind of seeped into me a little bit. You realize this when you're trying to match your watercolor paint with your teacher's watercolor paint, and it's very difficult to get the shading correctly. And when it comes to maps, you don't just need colors to make things look pretty. You find that colors are really one of the main tools that you use to differentiate, say, different demographic groups, or in something I was working on recently, different causes for fires in a region. All of this, color is one tool, one very useful tool when it comes to design, because in maps, all you're doing is conveying information. And so the most efficient way to do that is really helped by aesthetics. Aesthetics can either be good and then you don't notice them, or they're bad and they're very distracting. So that's that's kind of one really basic way that I have felt that I had a pretty good grounding in some sort of artistic background. Another kind of art, and I noticed right outside the door here, if you go in the hall and look to the right of the door, there's a perfect example of these two artistic activities that we did when we were little, is the watercoloring, which I mentioned. But on the other side of that is form drawing, and this is, you'll see out there, it's line drawing, and it's really an exercise. So I think we could all try to do a little bit of form drawing just in the air quickly. If you put up a hand, whatever you write with, as if you're holding your pencil. Now, you're going to try and draw the shape, and just start on the left, and draw the shape of a wave, like that. It kind of goes up and over, and then back down and around, and then up and over, okay? So, in the air, no one can see how bad it looks. Because it's very difficult to do this. And you'll see some, right out here, I noticed right out here, there's some of this wave pattern. The wave pattern's a nice, kind of easy one. It gets pretty hard too. But what I found was so useful in that is that it's not the ability to draw or to use your hand like that, but it's that you're not going to make it look perfect, but you're going to try, and you're going to, in trying, what you see is all the subtle differences in what your actions can do. And what I've really come to think about that is really, it's taught an appreciation for subtlety, and an appreciation for how to observe very small differences between different things of the same shape. When it comes to subtlety, when I started to think about that, it's really all around early Pleasant Ridge or early Waldorf activities. Another example is Boatmar gymnastics, which is kind of these exercises that we would do a few times every week, eventually in this gym when the school moved here. But the students will go through a series of postures and exercises done so as a group, but generally led by the teacher up front. And these also are kind of exercises in learning to observe and replicate subtle movements, and where form drawing is a very visual thing, you're really trying to make something look like something else. In Boatmar gymnastics, you're trying to observe your body and see how you can move it to fit the example, and you know when it works and you know when it doesn't work, but the real advantage is just in going through this process. And what you learn, or what I feel like I learned a lot of, was just concentration and appreciation for these subtle differences. So to bring that to something that I do now is really not hard at all, because we've all heard about how one line in a piece of code will cause a whole software problem. It will make the Mars rover explode or something, you know. One miscapitalized letter or a stray piece of punctuation. And I found that avoiding those problems, part of it is just being able to observe subtleties quickly, and being able to understand where all the little differences can be, and to have a good eye for being able to look out for that. And when it comes down to it, what you're doing is you're using a different, where here you're using your hands, or with Boatmar gymnastics, you're using your body. It's a lot of visual checking, and just it's a lot of repeating patterns and understanding patterns and how they can vary, and where the variations are good and where they're bad. The deeper part, I think, of those two, form drawing and Boatmar gymnastics, kind of another thing that really, what they're both getting at is not the specific instance of this one drawing was a really good one, so now you're done with form drawing, or you just did a really nice exercise in Phi Ed and you've won. That's really not how it works, because the point is to get good at replicating this, and what you're really seeking is to just understand the the larger form of what's going on behind it. And to be able to break it down, because you can draw a lot of these waves, but they all look different, but they all are obviously a wave. And so what you're doing is you're understanding the underneath sort of form of this. And when it comes to designing software or functions or anything like that, the real challenge is being able to do that. The challenge is being able to extract the most basic set of functions or the most basic set of information that you need to make this happen and pull that out into its own form, so to speak. And this has been really useful because a bit of what I've done is designing tools and interfaces for people to use who don't need to know at all what's going on behind the scenes. And so the challenge then is to be able to find this form behind what you need to accomplish and make it as simple so the smallest amount of input will create the best results or the most simple results. So a lot of that just comes from the ability to see a larger form instead of all the little differences between them, but also to, as I started with, recognize those subtleties. Another thing, and you've probably at this point heard about main lesson books, but it's really one of the most significant differences, I think, in Waldorf education, is that the students don't use textbooks per se. Sometimes we did for Algebra 1 or whatever, but generally the textbooks are created by the students themselves. And so for example, when we are doing our block on Roman history, we would create a book that had maybe on one page a poem or something that the teacher had provided that we copy into the book, or on another page a little essay we've written about what it was like to live in a house in Rome or something. I definitely remember drawing a map of the Roman Empire, and through creating that, the first thing, the most obvious impression that had on me was that I still like to internalize information this way, by writing it down. I like taking notes a lot, and it's not so much that you need to refer to those notes a lot, but it's that by writing things down, you are really internalizing them. And beyond notes, I do this when I need to design diagrams or things like that. It's been a very useful tool to have when it comes to internalizing any sort of new information. And I've done a lot of teaching myself things, so this is a really useful skill to have.